Onegaishimasu. So today is chapter 12 from the manual. And chapter 12 is on Bokken and Jo. And I'll just read a little segment from it. It says, before we can ever learn to move with a 4 to 6 foot sword or staff in our hands, we must first learn to become one with the instrument, to make that weapon feel and look as if it is part of our own mind body, not a separate entity or foreign object. Therefore, how we treat the Ken and Jo is of utmost importance. The Japanese look at the sword not as a weapon of destruction, but as an object of inspiration. The sword must be respected at all times, for it acts as a mirror of our mind. When picking up the bokken, when sitting with it, walking with it, handling it, or handing it to someone, in any way, it must be treated as though as part of your mind and body. So, this has a couple things I want to point out that you probably don't know if you've not trained in Maui. And of course, it has the saburi, which has been expanded from what is on the DVD that we offer. As well, it has the kata, and it has Bokken 1, 2, Jo 1, Jo 2, and the count. And what you see here, like on Bokken 1, it says, each knee, and then there's no hyphen. And then it says Sanshi, and then no hyphen. So when you don't see a hyphen, that's where you take a breath in the kata. So when you're doing uh, the Jo or the Bokken, um, you want to practice counting before you actually practice the movement. So I had a recording. In fact, when I was in Arizona, our counting was not very well done, not very well executed there. And Curtis Sensei pointed that out at a seminar that he taught us in Arizona. So at that time, we got a cassette recorder and we recorded him. We said, "Oh, Sensei, will you count?" So he just counted both Ken 1, Ken 2, Jo 1, Jo 2 into a cassette. And so we all made copies of it. So, and we listened to it in our cars while we drove. We'd listen and count with it. So we'd be like, Ichni, Sanji, Go Rogue, or for, Ken, or for Jo, would be Ich, Ni, Sanji, Go Rogue, Shichaku, Juju, Ich, Ni, Juzan. We would practice the counting over and over again. So I always tell people who are getting ready to study for or to start preparing for Shodan, because that's when you first have to demonstrate Ken 1 and Jo 1 is at Shodan. So I always tell people practice the counting on your own and then do sword work and count out loud and be very precise. That's the thing about weapons training is precision training. You have to be completely unified mind body, completely one with the sword or Jo, and therefore that allows you to move and count together. A lot of people's breath doesn't match the count or the cut. It's so they'll cut and their voice is off, and Sensei will immediately notice that, and he'll be like, "That's something wrong there." So always when you're practicing with weapons training, know the count by heart. Know when to take a breath, because if you're breathing and not counting correctly, your rhythm is going to be off. Like we discussed in the last chapter about rhythm. That's one of the key points of Taigi. If your breath and your cutting or movement with the Jo is not in sync, you will be out of rhythm, guaranteed. And so that's one thing I wanted to point out in this chapter. You know, I think out of everything in this chapter, that's like a really good tool to use. Is just that simple, the way they break the counting down and allow you to see where you take each breath. So, you know, it's funny. We tend to, when we're reading like Shokshu, you know, that's another way to demonstrate your breath power, and that's because people they don't know the rhythm of how the shokushu is written. So Sensei went and took the shokushu and then he put little lines, slashes, where you take a breath when you're reading shokushu out loud. So if you see the shokushu written, you'll see these little slash marks. That's where you take a breath when you're reading Shokushu. And I'll never forget Ed Grover, who was a professional voiceover guy, an actor. When he came to Maui one year, and it was at one of the seminars that Shinichi was at. I think it might have been the first one, and they asked him to read Shokushu. Let me tell you, he read Shokushu better than anybody I've ever heard read Shokushu. I mean, it was just amazing at his voice projection, his emphasis on the wording, the rhythm, the breathing, everything was just so good, you know, so precise. And I know one year, Curtis Sensei and Suzuki Sensei were doing a seminar in California, and they always stayed with Ed Grover at the apartment next to him or condo next to him in L.A. And one day they took him. It was for the Nagano Olympics, and Ed Grover was the voice of Visa. So Visa's a big sponsor of the Olympics, and he said, "Oh, Sensei, if you don't mind, today I have to go down to the studio and record a Visa commercial. Would you like to go with me?" And they were like, "Yeah, yeah, we'll go." So he took them down there, and they did back then they had to net in. They didn't have the internet. Wasn't I don't even know if the internet existed back then, but they had a call come in the studio, and L.A. was over the phone. They were listening in New York City, so they got them all patched in. All the executives at Visa are listening to Ed uh, read this Visa commercial, and there was a pronounced deal with Nagano. Uh, and I don't even know if I'm pronouncing it right, but the city, is, here we got Curtis Sensei and Suzuki Sensei, and Suzuki Sensei, who spoke a little Japanese there, and they said, "Oh, no, 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 say it like this," and Ed's like, "I'm here with my Japanese teacher, and you want me to pronounce this wrong? This is not how it's pronounced in Japanese." And there's a big, okay, let's go to New York, and the New York executives, we're talking about it, and then they go, "Okay, we'll do it both ways, and then we'll decide later." He recorded it both ways, with the pronunciation the way they wanted it, the pronunciation the way he wanted it, and did it that way. But it was just a real interesting perspective there, that they got to go to see Ed record professional voiceover for the Olympics there. That was pretty cool. But getting back to the chapter, it's everyone knows that Suzuki Sensei was really big on Bokken. But his Joe, I, he didn't do Joe later in his life because he felt he couldn't move as well, because of his knees and just age and what have you. But one morning, I used to train with Suzuki Sensei in the mornings, on Tuesday mornings down at the dojo. It was myself and Sally Worcester, and a few times Melly came, and this other lady who's no longer with us. We'd all meet down there, and Suzuki Sensei would teach us Bokken. But one day, I said, "Oh, Sensei," I said, will you demonstrate Joe 1 for us?" I don't know. I don't know. He didn't want to do it, but I talked him into it. And what he didn't know was, at the time, this was way back in the old day, I had a really old style phone, but that phone you could record on that phone. And so I recorded his counting with Joe while he did it. And it was so good. In fact, I was gonna try to play it through for you guys, but I said, nah, I'm not gonna bother because I don't know if it'll come out as good as it does, if you're actually hearing it. And it's so good of Suzuki Sensei. I mean, he couldn't move very well, but let me tell you, when he counted and did the Joe movements, you were like, whoa. You wanted to step back because it was that intense. When he went each, he was just right there. I mean, you were just like, whoa. It was really good. And I remember I had this recording. I got an MP3 or something like that, and I sent it to Curtis Sensei. I think I sent it over email. I don't know, a couple years ago. I said, "Oh, Sensei, listen to this." He said it brought back so many memories to him, of hearing Suzuki Sensei's voice, because we don't hear his voice anymore. We've got some old recordings and what have you, but to hear Suzuki Sensei count was just, it's really memorable. It was just a really cool thing. And I would listen to that recording of him, the way he counted Joe, and just try to, okay, this is how I need to copy it. This is what I need to do. And I would just listen to it over and over again and try to match that rhythm. So yeah, that was one of the fond memories of watching Suzuki Sensei do Joe, and then how he had this way of demonstrating. He said, "Oh yeah, when you demonstrate Joe, you end with this." He had this really flashy move that he would end with that he kind of taught me, and I remember doing it a few times and thinking, "Wow, that would be for a demonstration. That'd be a really good technique to use." Of course, I never would use that kind of technique because it's not really taught anymore. But it was just such an interesting perspective. And just to give you a perspective, Suzuki Sensei, learned Joe and Bokken from Toy Sensei. And I remember him telling me when he went to Japan for the first time, nobody at Hombu Dojo did weapons. Nobody. Nobody. They had weapons there, but the deshi weren't allowed to touch the weapons. The only time you could touch a weapon is if Sensei told you to get a weapon to attack him with. That's the only time. There was no, weapons classes, no Joe 1. So when he got there on their off time, he said, "Oh, yeah, see, do you guys do?" He was asking the Ushi there, and they're like, "Oh, no." And they said, "Well, what do you know?" And he said, "Oh, well, give me a Joe." And he did the Joe 1 and Joe 2. And they're like, "Whoa, how do you learn that?" "Oh, we got to learn that, because Toy Sensei had taught him, and because Sensei did weapons in Iwama. He didn't do them in Tokyo. And so Toy Sensei used to go to Iwama to learn weapons from Sensei, and that's how he learned most of the Joe movements and the Ken movements. But where Toy Sensei really learned weapons was from Tempu Nakamura, and a lot of people don't know that. Tempu Nakamura was, he was Toy Sensei's teacher for, mind body unification. That's where he gets Shinshin Tuitsu Do, was from Tempu Nakamura because Nakamura Sensei was that's the art he taught. His family was from samurai background, and he was a spy, I think, in the Russian-Japanese War, and was like captured. He's got quite the story. I highly recommend, if you can find his biography, Tempu Nakamura's, read it. It's really good, really super good. There's one written by H.E. Davies, but there's another one out there that I just found online. I can't remember the name of it, but it's supposed to be very good. And Tempu Nakamura, taught a lot about swordsmanship and actually taught Toy Sensei sword meditation, meditating with the sword. And a lot of people, I don't think, realize that Tempu Nakamura really influenced our way of doing Joe and Bokken. Not really Sensei. And you can see that if you ever watch anything from Iwama, and how Sensei did sword and Joe is very different. In fact, they have a completely different kata system that Iwama style does compared to what we do. And in fact, there are some Aikikai teachers, Yamada Sensei to be one, who doesn't even teach weapons in his style of Aikido. Doesn't do it. He's the head guy of the New York Aikikai, doesn't teach weapons. The reason why he doesn't teach weapons is because he didn't learn weapons in Iwama, and they didn't teach it at Hombu Dojo in Tokyo. So, you know, when I learned about that, I was quite shocked because they were interviewing. I read an interview with Yamada Sensei, and he talked about not teaching weapons, and that he said, yes, you can do Aikido without weapons, and I have to agree, you can. It's just another tool in your toolbox to teach mind-body unification, and that's how Tempu Nakamura kind of went off and taught it, and what Toy Sensei brought back from that, and basically developed his own. You know, he took a little bit of what O Sensei gave him, what Tempu Nakamura Sensei gave him, and kind of made, you know, Ki Aikido's weapons in his own style, which is just fine, you know, just fine. For what we do with it, it's absolutely masterful, you know, you could say. So, I don't want to take up all the time here, but maybe you guys have something you'd like to ask or discuss. I'll open it up. What do you think there? Gloria, do you have any comments on weapons training there? Joe, Bokken?
Um, well, I trained a lot initially, of course, with Nalawai Sensei. And one time he demonstrated for us doing the Jo very slowly. And he said that that wasn't even as slow as Tohei Sensei could do it. But I understand what Curtis Sensei is talking about when he talks about the power of the movements. Uh, when he goes slowly, you know, this building up and then moving that you see in Shinichi Sensei when he's doing arts. Or remember the last time he was on Maui, he had his weapon and he went like this, and his students scattered. They didn't wait for him to move. So, um, uh, yeah, at first, I mean, I have been pretty terrible with weapons. I have to go outside to practice, so I can't use a CD to look at. I have to memorize it. And, you know, funny thing, I can't see my computer from out in the yard. Um, and I try not to kill myself because it's a little uneven right now because it's been so dry during the summer. But I go out and practice and entertain my neighbors, I guess. But just doing it, he encouraged us to do, for instance, the either one, but I think it was Bokken as a meditation. You know, not worry about the counting, just do it kind of in a meditative state, and to move that way. And there was a ton of stuff I didn't understand when he was teaching us. When I had to prepare for my last test, I came to understand the movements and to, for once in my life, do them right. Before that, I think I was kind of sloppy. Uh, but you know, it's just practice, and it's really being present in all of your movements. That's I think the most important thing, just that presence while you're uh, doing the different movements.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, in fact, you know, it's quite interesting. Suzuki Sensei would teach us. Um, he would. It was really interesting during the class if we wanted to demonstrate Ken One, for example. He would have us sit in Seiza and close our eyes and then visualize us Ichi, Sanshi, Go Rok, Shichach, Kuju, Juichni, and then, you know, finish without even moving, and then stand up after doing it once visually in our mind, and then do it again. You know, not fast, slow. And in fact, I remember when I first, you know, when I originally took my Shonan test, that's how we did it. We did Ken one and Jo one, but we did it demonstrate them twice. We did it Ken one very slowly, and then we did it again, Ken one again at normal speed. And the same thing with Jo one and Jo two. We did it very slowly at first, demonstrating the whole thing, and then we did it at normal speed. And that's how we did it back then for demonstrating for a test. We did Ken one twice, Jo one twice. Once slow, once regular speed. So I know that they did emphasize teaching everything really crisply, really slowly, really, you know, completely mind body, you know, coordinated. So yeah. What about you, Fincher?
Hello, Sensei, and everyone. Um, I just am always impressed and amazed how holding something in your hands totally represents your character. When we, because when we go in front of Sensei and he has us cut or he has us do, a kata or something, uh, everybody that goes up there, including myself, it looks like I go up there and cut, and it looks like Fincher's cut. And Tracy goes up there and looks like Tracy's cut. And Jeff goes up there and looks like Jeff's cut. it's just, it's always so entertaining how it displays your mindset, your character, who you are, um, so much. And so it's an extension of yourself, both uh, restricted and free. Um, So it's a great tool. It's always amazing to me and entertaining when I can. Of course, I can't see myself, but people say, "Oh yeah, it's like Fincher's cut." But to watch someone cut and it just displays their character so perfect. So it's a good tool.
Yeah, very good tool, I think. Yeah, I uh, I never really liked Ken at all. When I was, I didn't like Ken. I didn't really care for weapons at all. I was like, yeah, you put a stick in my hand, and I don't know my left from my right. I just couldn't deal with it at all at the lower. I mean, I didn't. I remember going to the dojo, and I was like third kyu at the time, and they go, "Oh, we're gonna do weapons today." I'd be like, "Oh crap! I came on the wrong day. I want to learn aikido. I don't want to learn this weapons crap." I mean, that was my attitude. I did not like it at all. In fact, I really didn't like it until I moved to Maui and really, started talking to Kurta Sensei and Suzuki Sensei and how much they, emphasized it. And I was like, well, if they're emphasizing, there must be something to it then, because I was of the camp of let me just learn this Aikido thing and then I'll move on to weapons thing. I'm not doing this, both of them, because I can't do one of the, I got to do one or the other. So that was kind of my understanding back then of, and you're right, it's a great tool. I mean, you see people, how they hold what do they hold it with, like white knuckling it, just grabbing it so tight, or do they handle it so loosely that it's really sloppy? It's just it's fascinating to see people's separation. Because they're completely separate from the weapon. That's what I read. You really have to learn to be one with it. And I'll never forget, you know, Suzuki Sensei harping and harping before you touch the weapon, before you touch the Ken, extend key first. Extend key first, then touch it. You know, you must hold it with your whole mind and body. Just those little phrases he would just rip out, from time to time at us, just to kind of remind us, hey, got your mind and body coordinated? Come on. Don't be just sloppy with it. So that was always interesting to see. So, what about you, Lillian?
Hello, Sensei. Hi, everybody. Oh, we're on my favorite subject. I love weapons. Um, Fujimoto Sensei and Honoka taught Tanto and Jo. So I didn't get my experience with Bokken until I went to go train with Nonaka Sensei as a brown belt. And oh my gosh, I fell in love with the Bokken. And it's still my favorite thing to do in Aikido, even though I'm not supposed to have a preference. Um, and it's um, for me, it's very, very meditative. When I would go to open up the dojo when we're in normal, season, I get down there, I open up the dojo early, I sweep up and everything, and then I alternate between one class for a half hour, hour. I either do all Ken or all Jo, and I get my own time with the weapons. Now with my students, um, on the last class of the month for both classes, the kids and the adults, the last day of the month is their weapons class. So for the kids, I have different uh, broom handles and mop handles, and I always tell them, go find one that's between your armpit and the top of your shoulder, and all the kids run and get their little Jo. And then with the Bokken, I actually ordered kid-sized Bokken, and they love it. You know, and I thought that's a real good way to ease the kids into it. Of course, the adult class I have a lot more fun with because most of my adult class is taller than I am. And I am the perfect height in my dojo to be able to lift the sword correctly and not hit the ceiling. If I tense up at all, I hit my ceiling. So my poor tall students can't really practice the Jo and the Bokken completely correctly in our dojo. So they have to practice at home if they want to hit all the moves or come to the seminars or whatever. But I just love doing the weapons with the students. They seem to love it. And I do have a technical question. I noticed in the counting in the manual that it doesn't rotate back to each. It goes to, need you knee, and the count doesn't rotate back to each. Is there a reason why it was done in the manual that way?
Yeah,
That's on the counting part of it.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
That's a good
It
question.
didn't change though, right?
No, no.
Okay. Okay. Cool. But that's pretty much how I feel about it. I absolutely love the Bokken. I have several of them. I even have one at my daughter's house because she has a nice, beautiful front room ceiling that's really high. So when I go spend the night over there, I get to practice in her ceiling, in her front room when everybody's asleep. And I just, I'm thinking that my students really do look to that last class of the month for fun, and enjoyment. So yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll ask Curtis Sensei about that. I don't think, I think what they do that, my indication of why they do that to come back to each is because too many people were cutting their key at the end when they finish. Where if you end and then each, you're still, because that's a big thing. A lot of people will cut their key at the end of a technique and of a kata, and they're done, and they're just like, okay, I'm done, and they just kind of walk away nonchalantly, where you're not really pushing your key out. I would say that's my indication, but I'll clarify that. And yeah, it's a lot of people are have the same a lot of people in Maui love the Jo, love the Bokken a lot. They look for, there are people that will come just to Sunday morning class, because Sunday morning we would do, before the pandemic, every Sunday was misogi and weapons, misogi and weapons, and we'd always do the saburi, and then we would do, depending if somebody was testing for shodan, we do a lot of ken 1. If somebody's testing for nidan or sandam, we'll do ken 1 and ken 2, or Jo 1 and Jo 2, just to practice it. And I would often teach the way I would teach a class where, of just cutting shomen, right? But people get bored just cutting. So I would have people face one another far enough apart that they wouldn't hit. And then I would go up Ken and just have them hold, Jodan Kamai. Just have them hold it for like, I don't know, 30, 40 seconds. And then I would say, cut. And then they both have to cut at the same time. So if they were super relaxed, they could cut, and they'd be really spot on. And then the other person would lag behind. But if they were really good, both would cut at the same time. And it looked really good. You could tell when they're really extending ki with one another. really pushing their ki out, their cuts would fall just perfectly. So I would do classes like that a lot. And then I'd rotate people. So, we'd stand across, and then if we had an odd number out, like an odd number, I'd have the other person that was odd out face the mirror and cut the mirror. So then they'd rotate in a circle, clockwise, and so everybody get a turn facing somebody else, and then the other person, we get a different person in front of the mirror every time. So just doing up can, cut, and do that for like 30 minutes. Let me tell you, people would be really in tune with one another when they're facing each other with a wooden sword. Even though it's a wooden sword, they're still like, and you get the people that were like, I'm gonna cut you, and then the tension would arise, and then they wouldn't be able to cut really fast, But then you get the other people who would just connect, and they're not worried about anything, and they'd cut beautifully. And it was really interesting to see how people's cutting changed just in that exercise. Because we're so used to not facing another person and cutting, we're just usually just cutting the wall, or cutting the mirror, and that's a totally different mindset a lot of times. So to get that competition juices flowing, and get the people up against one another, and they're like, oh, it was always fun. And then I would be like, up can, and just let them wait there, just let them wait Jodan, just like waiting until I say cut, and then, or sometimes I would just go up cut, and then you'd get the people, hey, I wasn't ready yet, oh, who's not ready? Got to be extended gi, So, well, Ilaria, did you look forward to Paiva Sensei's classes at the end of the month with the weapons?
I suppose I did. I never, I guess,
I suppose I did. Well, I suppose I did.
I like weapons, but I don't really prefer it over any other thing that we do in Aikido. Yeah, I guess I just kind of would forget that it was happening, and then Sensei would mention it. Oh, weapon, that's right. Okay, yeah, last class of the month. All right. I've always cutting Bokken has always been the hardest thing I've ever learned in Aikido. Just because the physics of it seems really impossible. Like, you have to cut fully, but the Bokken has to stop at a certain place and it can't be too low. So it's like this dichotomy between completely letting go, but then also control. So that's always been really difficult for me and weird.
That's because you're using the scale. You hear Curtis Sensei talk about the scale, the whole, okay, can't be too soft, can't be too hard. We're looking at the Goldilocks here, the just right, but it's not on the scale. Yeah, so you have to get rid of the scale in order to really cut completely, and that's not to care, but yet care. It's kind of that dichotomy there. You gotta be able to cut, but not worry about your cutting. And if you start thinking of it on that scale of, oh, it's got to be this, just cut, just boom. It was so funny. There was a term that Kashiwaya Sensei would use sometimes. He'd be like, and I think it might have been, he might have gotten it from Suzuki Sensei, of saying, oh, you can't cut tofu with that. With that cut, you can't cut tofu. And we'd always, like, when you do the in Ken 1, when you do the diagonal cuts, we would always think of, okay, we're in a block of tofu and we have to cut and have it in the same line, so we were always visualizing that big block of tofu and cutting ourselves out of it. I remember that. And then if our cuts were really sloppy, it would either be myself, Pat, or Mayumi. We'd go, oh, you didn't even cut the block. It was that bad. I mean, it would look so, because when you first start learning it, your cuts are all wavy. They're not precise. They're all over the place. And I'd be like, oh, like it'd be a zigzag cut almost. That's when I was first learning Bokken. That was my little fun thing to do, I guess. We would torture each other with that. So, anyone else? How about you, Sasaki Sensei? Anything? Any weapon stories? preferences?
Well, like Lillian, I do like weapons, and I do have a lot of kid-sized bookends. So, in fact, if you ever watched me in Bokken class, I'm using the kid-sized Bokken. I'm at that in-between height, you know. I have both. I think, like every other Aikido person, I think I have 4 bookends and another 5 Joes. But it's really good training for the kids because it's like once they settle down and they want to use bokken, we pass them out and I just have them stand. And you know, I told them, join, extend through that sword, and you see these kids going, you know, because they just want to go swish, 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 which the wouldn't cut tofu. So one of the trainings I remember that not only Eto Sensei but Nonaka Sensei said that was, you know, you just stand there. You don't have to have a booklet in your hand. Just use your arm and cut a straight line, and you use the corner of a house or something, you know. And you have to relax your hand to do it because, like you said, Tracy, it's going, you know. And I can remember doing that every other night, you know, for about 20 minutes, just very slowly cutting the line. And I think that really helped, you know, because it was, you know, it's not something that you're going, you have to relax everything and just cut the line. So once that bookend is in your hand, aside from not squeezing the handle tight or doing something strange, like people tend to have the tip high up and you have to correct their stance, you know, all the time. And, you know, telling them, okay, do a few cuts and then stand. And then you have to readjust them. And you have to tell them, relax. And I thought, oh my God, I sound like my instructor.
Right.
But yeah, it's as Fincher said, he said, it's a good tool. It's something that when you kind of look gaze forward, you can actually see that tip even at standing, and it's moving. Yeah, so you have to really, you know, settle into one point just to stand. So, you know, God, you know, it's fun doing the katas. But then there's a lot of errors that you probably can't see. But when you have to do it in slow motion, like I was telling Lillian, you know, after a while, I started doing everything in slow motion to make sure I'm turning the blade correctly as I cut. Because when you do the katas, it's like, did I just slap the guy or did I cut him? You know, and it's very rude to slap your opponent, you know, instead of cutting him. So it's I see the value in slow motion, and it's hard. It's really hard. What I found was the hardest in the beginning was cutting the corner of the house with my hand, because I could see my hand wavering. So I like the training because it really makes me join and settle into my one point and extend from, you know, forward.
Yeah, I agree. We used to do that exercise. I remember they would teach us to cut a silk thread. You know, visualize that there's a silk thread and you're cutting it in half with the bokken. We used to do that exercise, and then uh, you know, when we were first learning the suburi here, um, Suzuki Sensei and Curtis Sensei made these targets where there was a black circle and then this line, and you'd have to cut through and your Bokken would stop in the black circle. And I remember finding some of these targets and going, "Remember these targets?" He would tape them on the walls, and then you'd practice it, cutting with the targets. That was always fun. Yeah, Suzuki Sensei really got into the Saburi later in his life, and you know, modify, teaching what he had learned from Toy Sensei, and then creating based on all the different cuts that he had learned into a variety of saburis. So those are always really useful tools, you know. But the thing of it is not to get stuck on them and only do that because
That's
there's
true.
so many perspectives, of Joe and Bokan, and you really want to just apply the principles to all of them. That's all this is for, is applying your mind body unification training to the sword, to the Joe, etc. So, yeah, I totally agree. So, John, what do you think?
Yeah, my own personal experience with the Joe and Ken. At first, I had a very difficult time um, learning. Yeah, I disliked weapons actually. So, but I did learn to like it. One of the things that Fincher was mentioning, your personality comes out, and whenever I grab the can, I just wanna my first intention is just to like destroy, crush the enemy. But I remember I'm practicing Aikido, and then I'm like, oh yeah, calmness in action, meditation. Um, Something Linda was mentioning about how she practiced slowly is actually what you always mention is like slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And yeah, I just throughout my experience, I've learned that training with Joe is kind of is a really good way to practice mind and body unification. Uh, but I do have a question. When you're dealing with Joe and Ken like at the same time, uh, what do you do? I mean, I still have this question in my head. Like when you're passing it to, during a test, you have the Joe and Ken, and you're offering the Ken to your partner, or you're receiving the Joe, or like I mean, you're receiving the Ken and you're offering the Joe, and then vice versa when you're doing the same, you're passing one weapon to the next. What do you do? How do you like deal with two things at one time?
Yes, don't deal with two things at one time. Didn't I think Curtis Sensei's taught that in a class?
Oh, okay, put it down.
Yeah, receive from
Right,
them, put it down, don't pick up your hand. I mean, think about it.
right.
It's like your hands were full and you had dishes and you had to, how do you deal the dishes things, so
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
Yeah. I remember it because one it was a long time ago, maybe 17 years ago. There was a test and there were some people involved with passing the Bokken and Joe, and they made it into this big ceremony. And I remember Curtis Sensei going, "You guys are making that too big a deal. It's not a big deal. Just pass the weapons to the person. It's not about the passing of the weapons. It's about the person testing." And they were trying to figure it out. And you feel when you get lost in your brain and your thought, you tend to start creating problems where there are no problems.
Right, thank you.
So, anybody else?
If I may, Sensei, I want to thank John for bringing that up, because at my Sandan test, the person handing me the Joe after the Bokken came up with the Joe, and I'm standing here with the Bokken, and I'm thinking, how do I do this? And I did think about handling that ahead of time. So thank you very much. If I do weapons again for a test, I'll know what to do.
Yeah, that is something that people tend to maybe lapse, like, oh, how do I get this here? What's going on? Yeah, it's just you just have to, of course, be mindful of it and have a plan in place.
Tracy, people making a big deal of passing weapons. I was wondering if it was because we're supposed to treat it as actual weapons.
Sure.
Because when I pass a real sword to someone else to examine, there is a proper etiquette on the pass.
Yes, I don't disagree with that. In fact, you do hand two hands, not just one, that kind of thing. It's the same thing like when you're doing tantodori, and how do you return the tanto to the other person? Do you just hand it to them, or do you extend key and hand it to them? There's a difference. Yeah. So of course, you have to practice that. But what I was getting at was more like people were trying to turn it into some unnecessary ceremony, when really it's just a matter of extending key and handing the person, the weapon they need to do the technique. So, anybody else? I know this is this chapter is really good. In fact, I didn't read the end story. I'll let you guys read the end story. It's also a very good story at the end of this chapter, it was the first time I'd ever read that story, about Yagyu Munenori. Um, yeah, very, very good story. I highly recommend it.
Sensei, I'm curious, have you ever done the extended Jo? I was looking at this down here, I'm thinking, what in the world are they doing? And then I read the description about it, and I've never heard that. I mean, we've practiced sets, like 1 through 6 or 1 through 4 or whatever, but to go in that systematic order had not ever done. And I don't know if that's a specific way you would do it, or if it's just a suggestion.
Okay, you're talking about the
on page 133 at the bottom, in the middle, it says, in addition to the kata listed above, the following Jo exercises are for perfecting movement and the voice. Yes. They're drills, exercises. Yeah.
Kyo Koryondo is practice. We practice it in Maui. You can do it with the Bokken or the Jo. And you've got to follow the specific counting. I highly recommend it. It really gets you into the flow. It really helps you learn a flow. And it's repetitive practice is what it is. And what they've done is they've been able to tie it together so you don't have to stop. You don't have to reset. It's just continuous flow of ki. And yeah, we do that training in Maui. I've taught it. It's excellent style of training. I first learned it. I think I first learned it in Arizona. It's quite old. I mean, they've been doing it for years and years and years. But yes, I highly recommend it. It's really good. Anybody else? Natalia, I don't know if you have any comments, or anybody else who's not pictured. It's okay. I mean, I haven't.
Hello, Sensei. Hello, everyone. I really love practice this Jo and Bokken with weapons, just because this state of mind is different from any other practice. It's just so. I have some problem with tempo, because when I do a movement slow, I have some strength in my movement, some power, and when I begin to do this rhythm and this tempo, I guess I lose this power, and it's problem for me, just for practice with weapons. And I have I have very useful practices weapons for practice Aikido. Then my sensei tell me this movement. Just imagine you have Bokken in your hands and the same movements. Oh, okay. I just understand movements in practice Aikido. And what about Jo? Uh, I highly improved my billiard skills. I began practicing movements. It's really so. So I guess that's all about weapons. It's what I think just now about it.
Yeah, it's good training, and practicing slow versus practicing fast. When we tend to practice fast, we tend to skip a lot of skip a lot of things. There's a lot of holes. If you're having to use speed or power, you're covering up a lapse in your mind body unification. That's basically what it is. You can cover those things up as when you're younger, but as you get older, you can't. Your speed and your power goes away as you get older. So you really have to be mind body unified to really do things well with any art form or any exercise. I was amazed watching, Suzuki Sensei and Curtis Sensei do, Bokken or Jo with complete mind body unification, and to be just like, oh wow, that's real, that's power from the one point coming at you, versus of just somebody who's big and strong and can use their muscle and their speed. um, so yeah, and like John, my mantra in all the aikido classes are slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Don't go fast until you can be smooth, and you can't be smooth unless you start doing things very slowly. So slow, smooth, then you can go as fast as you want. That's my mantra. So
Thank you, Sensei.
yeah, you're welcome. Um, Anybody else? I don't know if Kiyomi wanted to say anything or not.
Hello, Sensei. Hello, everyone. Um, yes, I think I was thinking of my Tai Chi class because we do have weapons too. We have two short sticks and long pole, long stick. That's one, and the sword, and two swords dance, and also very long, maybe 2 meter stick we use. And just like you said, slow movement is practice is very important. At the beginning of the class, we always start with this slow dance. It has 108 forms. With some of the forms repetition, but 108, and we do very, very slowly. And all other forms, we have fast dance and weapons. Those forms are actually based on those slow forms. So in order to do other forms, if we don't practice the slow form, it's very difficult to do. And so I think there is a similarity on the principles. And also, I was reading a chapter. I resonated with how you hold Bokken or Jo when we hold weapons, not too tight or not too loose. So there is a right, relaxed way of holding it in order to be very effective. If you hold it too tight, you can't really move smoothly. And then teacher always say, as sometimes for beginner people, when they have a weapons, they put too much attention to the weapons, and it's just they forget about the slow dance we just did. So he always reminds us of, holding not too tight, just right. And other things resonated to me was how Aikido, you respect the weapon, like sword is an inspiration. And I thought of the children I'm teaching Japanese to right now. They're first graders, and then how they hold the textbook is just one hand, and sometimes they just hold with the cover page. Of course, things gonna rip, and they carry like this. And I always say, this is a part of you, treat it like a best friend. So you carry with two hands. And do you, pull someone's hand, like carry like this? You don't do that. So you have to, treat it as part of you. It's like you're like so close friends. And I think the teaching has some, similarities, like Aikido, like even how you hold it, how you stand up, how you, sit down, has to be all together part of the practice. So I really resonated. I think it's important to include this oneness with anything when we hold, holding textbooks or holding pencils, or of course, then if you have that idea, they're not going to bite their pencils. So I was thinking, oh, I wish every student learned Aikido when they were young. So I think that would benefit them a lot, how they, live daily life, and they'll be more calm. And I learned a lot from this chapter. And thank you for teaching me how to extend ki before I even hold weapons. I'll practice that next time.
Oh yeah, good. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, I have to agree. Yeah, holding with mind-body unification, holding with weight underside. That's always been something Suzuki Sensei would emphasize. Curtis Sensei would emphasize on. The strongest finger is your pinky. Your pinky's connected to your one point versus the thumb, which is connected to the top of your head. And he would talk about how you hold a Jo or Bokken or Tanto with, these three fingers, not these two fingers, which we tend to do. So, anybody else? Good. It's almost, we got a couple minutes, so I'll read this story. Yagyu Matajuro was a young member of the Yagyu family, famous for the family tradition of swordsmanship. However, Matajuro's father was disappointed in his son's tendency towards laziness and banished him from their dojo. Matajuro resolved to seek out a master and return as a great swordsman. He journeyed to the Kumano Shrine in the province of Ki, where he heard of a great teacher called Banzo. The monks at the shrine told him that Banzo lived as a hermit up on the mountain and showed him the trail to follow. Eventually, he found Banzo, asked to be accepted as a student. How long will it take me to learn swordsmanship? He asked. The rest of your life, was the reply from Banzo. I can't wait that long. I will accept any hardship and will devote myself completely to the study of swordsmanship. In that case, 10 years. Yeah, but what if I train twice as hard? In that case, 30 years. Well, why is that? First you say 10, now you say 30. I'll do anything to learn, but I don't have that much time. Well, in that case, it's going to take you 70 years. Sensing the direction of the conversation, Matajuro capitulated and agreed to work as long as it took and do anything he was told. However, for the first year, all Banzo had him do was perform simple physical tasks, such as chopping wood. After a year, Matajuro was disappointed and demanded that Banzo teach him some swordsmanship. Banzo merely insisted that he chop wood. Matajuro went on to the woodpile and was chopping wood, but inwardly he was furious. He resolved to leave the next day. But But while he was chopping wood, Bonzo crept up behind him and struck him painfully with a wooden sword and said to him, "You want to learn swordsmanship, but you can't even dodge a stick." From that day on, Bonzo would creep up on Montajuro and attack him relentlessly with a wooden sword. Eventually, Montajuro's senses became very heightened, and Bonzo had to change tactics. Now Bonzo would attack repeatedly, even when Montajuro was asleep. For the next 4 years, Montajuro had no moments of rest from a fear of an unexpected attack with a wooden sword. One day, when Montajuro was stirring some food on the fire, Bonzo crept up and attacked him by surprise. Without thinking, Montajuro fended off the blow with the lid of the pot without taking his mind off stirring the food. That night, Bonzo wrote a certificate of mastery for Montajuro, and he left. So, with that in mind, we will close the class, and I'll see you guys next week. Domo arigato gozaimashita. Have a good week. Hope to see you Wednesday or Friday or Sunday. Thanks a lot.